So welcome everyone once again to the webinar, which is titled Building Emotional Resilience. Veena and myself, Neerja, are going to be engaging with you all over a discussion. So we've decided to keep the format of this webinar a little different. It's not going to be a one-sided yarn session. We thought we would really like to engage with the participants today, so the format is slightly different, and you will see how it is different. And I hope you would all, love that. We would like feedback on that so that going forward we can make webinars more and more interactive. We had also quizzed you all. We had also asked you to submit some questions relevant to this topic. And as we started seeing the questions, we realized that people may not have understood the topic well. Emotional resilience, right? Because there were a lot of questions on emotional intelligence, emotional management, and a lot. And we definitely are going to pick all the questions that have come to us towards the end and address it. But we thought it is something that we need to also describe in terms of what emotional resilience and resilience itself as a term means. So what we're going to cover today is, of course, what is resilience and strategies to build the resilience, because the topic says building emotional resilience. And there is this particular quote that we came across, which says, "I'm more vulnerable than I thought," which all of us are. It's just that, the degree, the extent, as well as the circumstances makes it, more or less for each of us, but much stronger than I ever imagined, which is absolutely true. I think it is, during episodes of setbacks, and I'm using a very mild term. I don't want to use crisis and all of that, but something that kind of, pushes us back, especially emotionally, is also when we kind of emerge much stronger. And that's exactly when we also build emotional resilience, and over a period of time it just makes us better at dealing with setbacks. So that's about me and Veena, and we're not going to take time introducing ourselves because many of you know us by now. Otherwise, there's a little bit of intro about us, and you can go and look us up on our LinkedIn pages and websites. But I will kind of hand it over to Veena.
Yeah, thank you, Neerja. So let's get started, with a very interesting topic. So one disclaimer I would really want to make, even before we really deep dive into this topic, in terms of probably what me and Neerja, all of us are going to share in terms of, the different discussions which are going to happen in the course of this, webinar, is more from our own personal experience and probably how we as practitioners have actually embraced this emotional resilience itself in our life. So we are not mental health practitioners or psychologists, so I want to put a disclaimer there. So it's more from a practitioner's point of view is what we're going to share in today's webinar. So with that, let me just get started. Anisha, it will be good, for you to really share from your own experience, something where you faced setback, like as you rightly said, you don't want to use, crisis or any of the term. So something where you faced setback, which probably, you thought that you're going backwards. And how did you really bounce back in terms of, that experience of yours?
So to start with, I would like to tell everyone that everyone has had their shares of setback. Okay, so there is nobody who's not had it. When we look at someone and say, "Wow, I think this person has got it all," and why am I going through this? But the point is that all of us have gone through enough and more in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and we've kind of coped with it. So there are many stories that I can talk about, but let me talk about this one. So I have had 25 years in the IT world in my corporate life, and in one of the organizations that I was working for, and most of you, if you worked in these large monolithic organizations, you know that every couple of years there would be a reorganization, right? They change organization structure and you'll have a different role. So there was a reorganization, and they introduced a new function called as workforce management, and they decided to have it decentralized. So in each of the business units that we had, they introduced a workforce management function, and I was heading the workforce management function for the Asia Pacific business unit. A year later, they decided to centralize this, which meant that all the 6 business units, the people and the teams, team members, everyone had to come together under one particular structure. And of course, the rest of the team members somehow found a place for themselves because they were much junior, but there were 6 leads, right? Each of us heading the function. So we didn't know who was going to become the boss and, what's going to happen to the other 5. For me, I was very sure that I wouldn't get the boss position because I was managing a smaller portfolio. It was Asia Pacific. I was working in an organization which was, I will name it also, it's ANZ. So, I knew that the person sitting in Australia would get the, boss position. So I was not even, worrying about that. But after he became the lead for that new team, we were waiting for the next layer to be kind of unfolded. Who gets what, right? And it took us a while. And after a couple of months, the 5 of us who were in that position got an invite to have a one-on-one with him. So we were hoping that he'll tell us, this is the role for you. But when I had the conversation, what he said is that I'm not going to appoint anyone into any role. I'm actually going to do a spill and fill. For those of you who don't understand this, it means that all the roles become vacant and none of us are in any roles. And we have to apply for a role amongst all those. And if we get selected, then we get a role. If we don't get selected, then as per the policy of the organization at that point in time, we had to exit the organization. Well, so that itself was a big thing, right? Because it had never happened in the history of ANZ in Bangalore. Second was, we were, if I remember correctly, I think we were 6 of us, looking at that position, and there were only 5 roles that came out, which meant for sure one person was not going to get a role. So that was a second shock that came. The third shock which came was that all these roles were graded at a level which was one level lower than what I was at. While it didn't make a difference for the others because they were all at that level or maybe junior than that. But for me, it was a big thing, right? It was one grade lower. So now I really didn't know whether I have to look forward to applying for these roles and getting the role or, not apply, exit. And the worst thing was that it was time bound. You didn't have all the time in the world to make the decision. So they gave us 3 days to apply for a role. If you didn't apply in those 3 days, you had to exit. Okay, and if you had applied, then they would select. If you got selected and accepted, you could stay on. If you rejected, then you move out in another 3 days, so 6 days total. If you kind of didn't make it, also you exit. So the situation was very grim, right? I didn't know whether I should apply, get a lower grade role, and be happy that I have a role, or not to apply. So it was extremely, extremely difficult. So I went out and spoke to a few people in the organization, and the only piece of advice that I got was, buy time, right? And how much time am I buying? By applying for the role, I buy 3 days time. So they said, doesn't matter, buy time. So while I hated, myself and hated the organization and all those emotions, I still went and applied for the role, which was a grade lower than mine. And I bought those 3 days. I went back home, didn't go to office for 3 days because we didn't need to, because we anyways didn't have a role. But what else could you do? I was in that organization for 14 years and I had not even looked at, a CV for myself. So if I had to sit and create a CV, it would probably take me 14 days to think of all my 14 years and put it down. It was not going to happen in 3 days. I was not connected to any recruiter, no headhunter. I was in a pretty senior leadership position also. I was not on any job portals. I was not even on LinkedIn. So there was no way I was going to get an external job in 3 days. On the 4th day, I was called to the office and they told me that I got the role that I applied for. Again, it wasn't a great moment. I wasn't, craving for that role, right? I actually felt even worse that you applied and then you got also one role which is at a grade lower. Well, again, buying time, I accepted it. But one of the things that I always do, whatever comes my way, small, big, whether I'm, doing it voluntary, is that I'm extremely sincere to the job that I have taken on. So despite the fact that I was going through so much of, I can call it trauma, I went to the office every day and I performed the role, that I was expected to. But I really wanted to do something. So I said, let me go and speak to the MD of the organization. I didn't know the MD, the person didn't know me, but I sat at some time with him and I went and told him this is what has happened. I'm feeling so miserable that I want to quit this organization. So the first question he asked me was, how many years have you been working here? So I said 14 years. So he said, why have you stayed on here for 14 years? And the point that he was trying to make is that, did you never experience, highs and lows, in the last 14 years? Is this the first time? And of course not, It might not have been as bad as this current situation, but there would be times when you didn't get a performance rating like you expected, you didn't get a bonus, a raise, you didn't get a project, an opportunity, or whatever, somebody else got it, and you would have gone through a low. Then why did you still stick on for 14 years is what he asked me. One of the reasons, of course, was that, the organization did care for people and also offered a good level of work-life balance. Being an Australia, New Zealand, facing company, you didn't have the late evening calls and all of that. You could go home at 6, finish up the stuff at home, and then, log in later at night and all of that. It was really, kind of a good situation to be in. And that was the motive for me to kind of not look outside in the last 14 years, which I told him. Then he said, have you spoken to people at home about the current situation? And I said, I don't think it's necessarily like I can tell my husband and he'll say, decide what you have to decide, because, he doesn't want to make a decision for me and get into trouble. And the in-laws would probably not understand the situation. My daughter was very, very young at that point in time. So I said, no, I haven't. And he said, no, I think you should speak to people at home. Like, you must talk to your daughter and ask her whether she likes a mama who comes home at 6 or she would like a mama who comes home at 10. Because these are things which will allow you to think through and take some decisions. And then he said, go back, reflect for a week, think about, why you want to leave. And after a week, come back. And if you still want to leave because of what you've gone through, I will help you get a job outside. If you do not want to leave, then we can't correct the current situation, but we'll see how you can get back to another role which has the grade that you were at. So I reflected and I went back and I told him that I will continue in this organization, because that reflection of a week made me think about why I had stayed on, why will I stay on. The only reason which I didn't want to stay on was the fact that they did something to me which was not right. Or maybe it's right as per whatever rules they had, but I took it personally, correct? Beyond that, it was a good organization, the job was good, and everything else was good, the work-life balance could continue to be good. And if I decided to quit and get into another company, there's no guarantee that that organization would be, like a dream company for me. It might have worse hours of work, they may not treat you well, or, they may, ask you to quit after 6 months if something goes wrong. I chose to stay back. And he told me the story about himself. He said he came from a services company into, this captive that we were working at. And he said that the life and the work in a services company is extremely challenging. You're always on a high, chasing something high. But in a captive, it's more plateaued, because you're serving only one customer, your own customer, and you kind of have a more settled life, if I may say. But after he came to this company as the MD, there were many, many days when he felt, where am I? Why have I joined this company? I mean, after a services company for X number of years, you really don't feel like working in an organization like this. But he said that when he was leaving that earlier job, he had done some reflection and he had put a list of things which were priorities for him. And in that priority, one was family, which he was not getting at all in his earlier. He couldn't see his wife, kids, talk to them on a daily basis. And because of that, he chose a job like this in a captive. So he said every time he feels so, disappointed, depressed that, this organization is not giving him those challenging opportunities, he opens his cupboard, opens up the sheet of paper, looks at the list of priorities, and he says, I made this decision because I want family time, and I'm getting that. And that kind of makes him resilient and, go with whatever, emotions he is going through. So he said, always in future, whenever you feel bad, open this checklist because of which you came and told me you want to continue in this organization. And that will help you deal with this and take actions to the next thing. So, that's the story. And to end it, I would say that because I happen to be in the workforce management function, this was a function where any new requirement for hiring or anything would come into this function. So I knew what exactly roles were opening in the company. And so I kept my eyes glued. And the minute I saw a role which was at the earlier grade, and it took me about a couple of months to, kind of look at it, I went and applied for it. I had a conversation with the hiring manager, told him about whatever has happened, said, I will join this if you give me that grade. And I got the role at that earlier grade, and actually I got a raise in the salary. So I think, probably this only made it, get better for me. But this is one of the stories that I thought I should narrate in terms of setback. Definitely took me a great back, but how I kind of cope with it with some advice, from a very senior person in the organization. Tina, I'm sure you also have many stories, and we've chatted up so much, off screen. So maybe, one of your stories for the audience today.
Yeah, sure, Nirja. So before that, maybe, it's a good idea to actually stop sharing our PowerPoint so that, we are more visible to the audience.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Nirja. So as you rightly said, so I can actually connect a lot in terms of the story which you shared. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. So, from my own life experiences, which probably started, even as a teenager, where I had setbacks, starting from probably not getting into my dream college, which I wanted to get, or probably, while I was growing up, having some relationship, setbacks. But one thing which I want to really share today is more related to, the transition, which I had to, take a decision when I had joined the Indian Navy in Short Service Commission after 7 years. So when I was in Navy, I had actually, and had completed 7 years of my short service tenure, I had to make a decision whether I decide to take the extension of 3 years, because at that moment of time, the government of India decided to continue, since I was from the first batch of women. So they were still trying and testing out in terms of the women entry itself. Right. So they decided to give only another 3 years of extension, to us to begin with. So, or so one is taking an extension of 3 years, or the other option was me building my career from scratch in the outside world, and probably not even know where I'm going to go. So at that moment, having these two options, where it was continuing in the Navy with, that certainty being there, for 3 years, taking that extension, probably continue with my comfort zone and not disturb anything, even from personal point of view, because at that moment I was already married. I had a small child. And also my husband was from the defense force. So that was possibly the obvious choice which one would have made. And probably many of my friends who were there with me, did make. The second option was that I, starting and rebuilding my career in the outside unknown world, where I had no clarity what I'm getting into, where will I get, what option or opportunities would open up for me, and also disturb my complete personal setup, which was there, that comfort zone, since, as I said, I was already married. But believe me, when my boss asked me to take the decision and actually sign in that agreement, whether I want to continue or discontinue, actually, even for a moment, I was just thinking, what am I, there here for? And what's my larger purpose, And I just said, sir, I've decided to leave the organization. And in fact, he was shocked. He said, your husband is still in the same organization. Why do you want to leave? So I didn't even think for a moment, and I decided to quit. And probably it also led me to also disturbing a lot of the other aspects, both personally and of course professionally. I had to restart literally from clean slate and rebuild my career. And what possibly, in terms of the decision which I had already, had taken, there was no looking back after that for me. And it was only, moving forward. And during my last year, where, this whole decision making had to be done probably for us, a year before I was to leave. And I started looking at every opportunity which came my way, in that last 1 year, in terms of really developing skills and opportunities which probably would align, or help me to fit into, an organization or the corporate world outside. And you know what, Neeraja, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. And I when I look back, everybody around me, be my colleagues, my peers, in terms of what I wanted to do, and also in terms of what, the opportunities came my way, I actually felt that, they were only, universe was conspiring, to help me out in terms of coming out of this situation. And I still remember 13th of July was my last day in that organization. And 14th of July, I was working in another organization with a very senior consultant, and starting my journey in, in the corporate world, and where my journey had just started. And now from personal front, as I said, at that moment, I was going through immense challenge, where I had to take up the responsibility of bringing up my children. So by then, in fact, I also had my younger one. The second one also was there. And, there were many moments, where and my husband was transferred in some other place. And believe me, that 4-5 years of my initial, when I was stepping into a completely a new setup, was really tough, even on a personal side for me, where I had to manage with 2 small children, all myself, taking up that responsibility of bringing them up. And I, even when I look back at that moment, I really cannot believe as to how I really got that strength to move on and just to hold on to what I had, stepped into. And there were many moments. In fact, I still, I used to have this discussion with my family where I thought of just quitting, and, leaving everything. I said, oh, this is not, going okay. We're running up, setting up a family, in 2 different cities, and that's not going to be sustainable for us. But everything, what made me to continue was always connecting me to the larger purpose as to why did I take the decision, and what actually is going to be in store, and why am I doing this, and what probably the big picture in terms of how is it going to enable me personally, from in terms of the driving the purpose of, what I want to carve in terms of my career, and also the larger purpose in terms of what do I want to, give to my family or my children, and, connecting to that big picture. And so this is some story. This is one of the story which I thought, Neeraj, I would share here in terms of, how, the decision, or I wouldn't say, the setback, probably I created it for myself. It was not a setback, but I created that setback for myself in terms of making that crucial decision, which, sometimes, the world just throws certain things on you, and you have to make that crucial decision. And, how do you really bounce back in terms of that decision, what you've made, and, and move forward, and not really, move back. So that is something which I thought I would share here.
Wonderful. And that was very much early on in your life and in your career, and you've seen so many years since then. Any 1 or 2 strategies that you always kind of fall back on or use whenever you go through such?
So for me, some of the strategies which has always, worked, or I always fall back, is that, the optimism or that self-belief, and that's number 1, which stands out for me. And for me, once I have made a decision, and I always say, if there is a setback, there's no point in, delving more in terms of what's gone wrong. Rather move forward, so I always look at asking myself, what is it that I need to do to move forward, to take control back into my, of my life, or take charge of my life, rather than, put myself into a situation where, I just, emotionally drain myself and, look at, oh my God, everything is fallen apart and all of it. So that's one thing, which has always helped me. And the second one, which also has enabled, in multiple facets, for me, is also about really, that self care, or I would say, the self love. So I always believe in that, and so for me, it's very, very important. How do you really, take care of yourself from, the physical fitness point of view? And also, you're also taking care of your mind. So I do practice a lot of meditation and yoga. So especially for past few years, it's helping me a lot. And the third one, I would say, is also having that, that internal locus of control, where, in spite of any challenges, it could be small, big or small, which all of us face, I always own up the responsibility of whatever good or bad happens to me in my life, and take control of that situation, rather than looking at blaming the environment for it, and look at what can I do to bring back that take that ownership of my life. So that has always helped me in terms of really that having that internal locus of control. So these are some of the strategies. So maybe it's good also, Neeraja, for you to share as to what are some of the strategies which has helped you from your some of the journeys which you have gone through.
Yeah. One of the things which has almost become like a tagline is my question to myself anytime, not necessarily only when there is a setback, even when that opportunity presents itself and you're evaluating whether should I do it or shouldn't I do it, right? Is what's the worst that can happen? That is my number one question to any situation in my life. What's the worst that can happen? And that will give you some answers, right? And if that worst that can happen is something that you can cope with, you can deal with, go ahead. That's how I kind of look at it. So if you were to ask me, what is that worst which will kind of put you with the tips? I think probably if it is life threatening, then maybe I will sit and say, okay, let me really think about it. Life threatening for me, or
Neeraja?
from the company, right? Is that something that
Neeraja, you need to probably repeat your last sentence. We missed you. There was a bit of
okay? So I was saying, like using this question in the earlier story that I narrated. What is the worst that could have happened? The worst case scenario was that I would have exited from the job if I had not applied for it, correct? And can I deal with it? So if I thought through it, yes, of course, I could have dealt with it, because I've had that many number of years of experience and, a salary that had been coming, which I had saved up. So it could have let me, go on for a few more months. So that's the worst. That means that my life is still safe, right? So it kind of helps you move forward. You don't, start thinking of the worst. The worst is something you can cope with. Now let's look at the next. And the second thing is take action. For me, I can never sit and, just kind of brood over the situation. Take some action and move on. There are emotions that are playing. You are feeling bad, you are feeling angry, you are feeling depressed, but you have to move on from there. You have to kind of take some small, big action and move on. And it will result. Eventually, when you reflect, hindsight, which all of us do, is that probably, triggered us to do something better. Always, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't have thought of those options. So these are the two things. What's the worst that can happen? If you can deal with that, the situation is perfect. You don't worry about it, and take some action and move on. Exactly as you said.
Okay. So maybe you can share your screen, Neeraja?
Yeah, let me go back and bring that up.
Yeah. So moving on and building this topic of discussion today, what is resilience all about? So, hearing the story of Neeraja and probably what you've heard from me as well, and I'm sure all of you can relate to it. So obviously, in simple words, it's nothing but, how to really bounce back in terms of the adversity, the crisis, setback, whatever term you want to use really, how to really bounce back in terms of the situation or, what gets thrown at you. The second thing, which I want to add on is, to that definition would be, it's not about winning the battle. A lot of us, think, it's, when you have these kind of moments, it's about, how do you really, win that battle. It's not about winning the battle. It's more about, what is the, strength which you can really build to power through that storm, which is, in front of you. And it's all about, having that capacity to recover and, the toughness which you build in terms of, going through, all that emotional, whatever the trauma you're going through. And the third is actually, I would say it's a process by itself. It's a process. It's not that, by click of a button, you reset and, you bounce back. That's not going to happen. So I would say it's a process of adapting in terms of, when you face this adversity. And, from my own experience, I would say, when you say this emotional resilience, it can actually differ in between different, spheres of your life. And what I mean here is, when it comes to, say, for example, a personal setback, probably the way you bounce back would be different, vis-a-vis probably what you would probably have in your professional setback. So it is not that the same person is going to have the same kind of an emotional resilience, in different spheres of life. So it can be that it is also different in the way probably Neeraja would react if it comes to very, very personal, right? So, and also the quantum of, that setback, what you are facing. And at the end of it all, it's all about, how do you really experience, it's a path or the journey, what you're going through. As I said, it's a process. And eventually when you reach in terms of, the desired goal or the top or whatever you want to say, and when you look back, you really, come back stronger, and you can really look back and see, how far have you come. And that always, it's like building your muscle, and which helps you even probably in the future, setbacks or the adversities what you're going to face. So resilience is nothing but bouncing back, and it's like building your muscle. And we will build on this topic further. So Neeraja, maybe the next slide.
Yeah. So as we told you at the beginning of the session, we are doing this a little differently, and we want to be very interactive and for you all to kind of have a discussion and maybe reflection so that you have some actionable takeaways. We thought that we should do a series of activities. To start with, we give you about 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes. Reflect on, some adverse moments in your life. It could be what you're going through now. It could be something that you went through in the past. And it's not to reflect on those moments and feel bad. Right? The activity is not bad. The activity is list down 1, 2, 3 strategies that you put in place because of which you were able to bounce back, as Veena said. It's possible that you're currently in a situation and you're still kind of figuring out how to get out of it. And if that is what you want to kind of bring to the table, then that's okay. I will also say that this activity will lead you to a further interactive activity where you will be divided into 3 groups. You will be put into different breakout rooms, and we would expect you to discuss on the strategies that has worked for you through the situations that you are going through. We don't want you to discuss your personal professional situations. That was a story that Veena and I narrated just to kind of draw the picture of where we are going, but more the strategies that you used. So that will be for discussion when you get into your individual breakout rooms as a group. But for the next 3-4 minutes, do reflect on what worked for you, or if it didn't work for you, you tried something, didn't work for you. List down 2 or 3 of those, which you can take for further discussion. So I hope everyone has a pencil, a phone next to them, scribble on anything that you want to, because you want to keep this and take it further for discussion. I'll just start the stop clock. We have close to 4 minutes to do this. If anyone has not understood it, has questions, happy to take them on chat. Okay, there is Rekha. Okay, Rekha, I mean, there is a question that you put through. If you want to kind of think about a particular situation and take it for discussion in the group that you will be part of, you could do so. Otherwise, we can definitely address this question that you have put at the end of today's session. But it would be great to get others' perspectives also. So I really wish all of you take the discussion into the breakout. We've got another 2 minutes more, and I hope people are sincerely doing this activity.
Yeah. So what's important is, because the same, whatever you put down is what you're going to take it in your next activity. And as Neeraja rightly said, focus more on strategies rather than, the adverse movement itself, what you faced.
Another 30 seconds. I hope that's kind of enough time for you to list down the strategies and move into your
put the next slide for us to.
I'll do that.
Yeah. So in this particular activity, what we're going to do is we're going to divide this entire set of participants who have joined us, which is around 40 who are here, and we're going to divide them into 3 teams and into breakout teams. And where so you will get an invite, through Zoom, where you can actually enter that particular room and do the discussion with your team members. And the intent of that breakout activity is that you share whatever you discuss, you have done as part of your self-reflection, individual strategies to your team members in your breakout team. And then towards the end of probably, each of you can share in terms of what strategies you have written down or self-reflected. And towards the end, you can summarize. Probably one of the team member can probably write it down and also summarize the top 3 strategies as a team, which you would like to bring to the larger audience, which is, out here. And one volunteer could present at the end where, you come back. So once you've done the breakout, we would also request you to come back to the main session. So don't exit the main session when you are exiting the breakout. So come back to the main session. We want you back. Yeah. So I'm going to open the rooms.
Yeah, just a minute. A minute. So I also want to tell them that, of course, you will come and share and present, because that's collective wisdom that we all have. But we will, after that, also kind of present a few strategies which we already discussed and what we've observed has worked for others. And after which we will take questions from all of you. There have been questions, as I said, which have already come through the form, and we will address those and any other questions that still have not got covered. So please do come back and stay on with us, like Mr. Amitabh Bachchan says during KBC. Don't go away.
Yeah, don't go away. Yeah. So I'm opening up the breakout rooms. So request you all to participate and actively contribute to the larger discussion. Yeah.
Anu, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. So I'll just quickly reiterate the first point that I mentioned, which was basically acceptance and awareness, without which it becomes very difficult to move forward or realize where you are. That was one. And you're basically frozen, so you're not able to take any next step. Just give me. The next thing was, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Elsa from Frozen, but like she says, just do the next right thing. It can be very overwhelming when you think about what to do when you're stuck in a situation, and everything seems overwhelming. At that point, just doing the next right thing, taking the one small step always takes you towards the right direction. And the third and the fourth, I have two more. One is service. This was more from a personal, setback point of view, where service definitely helps. Any kind of service, community service, or any volunteering, sort of gives you a perspective of where you are in the world and gives you broader outlook. And building self-awareness, that is also sort of building yourself up, like Selena was saying in our room about building skills. So building skills along with building self-awareness sort of helps to come back.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Anu. That was great. Ayesha said that she would like to go next. Ayesha?
Yes. So actually, we couldn't discuss anything in our groups. I started speaking, and the time was up already. So I'd like to begin again.
Yeah, sure.
So I call it this strategy as inside out paradigm. It's like it involves three different steps. So first, we regulate our thoughts. What are we thinking? And then we regulate, we identify our emotions, so we know which thought is resulting in which emotion. And it's like our emotions don't pop up from anywhere, so they come from thoughts. That's what I have read and I have related to and I've worked upon. And the next is redirecting our thoughts so that our emotions get balanced automatically. So for example, I mentioned the same example earlier in the discussion room. So if a professor yells at me, like I'm still a college student, so if a professor yells at me, and what I would generally think as an old Aisha who didn't know about this inside out paradigm, so I would think that this person hates me. He is always trying to corner me and stuff like that. And then it affects me. So if my emotions get affected, I'd always be like, I don't want to go to college, I don't want to study, I don't want to meet that person. I would try n number of ways to avoid the situation and avoid that person, right? So but then if I regulate my thoughts that this person might be having his own baggages and he's dealing with something of his own, then I like my emotions would be more empathetic towards him. And then I would be like, yeah, I would not get affected by what he says, I would not get offended. So yeah, that's how I deal. So if my emotions are in place, my objectives would be achieved, my goals would be achieved. So emotions are the primary basis. If you feel good, you do good in life. Thank you.
Okay. So we could have probably the others unmuting and speaking. And I would urge you limit yourself to 2 strategy, because so that we have a chance given to everyone.
Yeah, I can go next.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Vatsala. So
Hi, Vatsala.
Hi. So yeah, I do have a few strategies that worked for me in the time of when I was having an emotional setbacks. So yeah, every time it's like I try to analyze the situation and just write out, okay, what's the positive and negative. So currently I'm like away from my family, and I knew that if they need something, I cannot be with them. So it's like, other than my physical presence, I try to give everything to them. So that's how I list my points, rather than just going into an emotional breakdown thing that, okay, I cannot be there. So that's how I write my points. Okay, what can I do with now? Rather than on thinking that what could have I done. So that's how it works. Another thing, I mean, it's not based on any personal or professional thing, but yeah, every time when I come to a situation that, okay, things are not working for me, the only thing that works for me is my heartbeat. So it's like, if it is working, I can still manage to get through it. So that's how the 2 strategies that works for me is like, if I am alive, I can still get through it.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Vatsala. Who's going next?
I will go next. Vidya here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I shared in the other room also, my strategies that I have used is, first and foremost, is I have stayed positive, which has really, really helped me. And the second is I have connected with people who can help me in the situation that I am. So basically networking or gathering information about things that can help me get out of that setback. So those are the 2 strategies that I have used, and they have worked for me in the past for beautifully. So yeah.
Thank you, Vidya.
Hello, I would like to go next. I am Manasvi. Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm still a student and I'm figuring out that I'll be graduating this in 2020, and it's a very tough time because you know that the jobs are less and everybody is in a haywire situation. So the one strategy that I've always followed is the 10-10-10 rule. So before taking any decision, I always think that whether it is going to affect me in 10 days, 10 months, or 10 years. So mostly my every decision is it doesn't matter if I think about that whether this decision is going to make any change in 10 years, so mostly they do not matter, and I go for it, and this is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I can go next.
Hi,
Renuka.
this
Sorry.
is Beena. Hello, can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
This is Beena. Okay, so basically, like first and foremost, I try to come to terms with, acknowledge what is happening, try and come to terms with it, and try to see how I can look at it in a positive manner. Then, of course, listing down the pros and cons if I have choices to make. And one more thing is that if I'm feeling too low, to do some good gesture which brings positivity back to me, some good community work or giving something or helping someone else out, which brings the positivity back to me. So those are a few things.
Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, I would like to go next. I'm Pallavi, and these are my true strategies, which I've been practicing this since 4 months. One is that chanting. Along with chanting, I've been using these affirmative sentences, positive affirmative sentences, like if I want to attract some good fortune or financial abundance, I'm actually repeating that sentence while chanting, and it has really, really helped along in the process, because that chanting, that statement is directly affecting me positively and is actually encouraging me to do those kind of things which I can eventually attract in the coming days. And of course, the other one is like whenever I'm communicating with my colleague or my family, whenever there's a problem or problem arises, I always start with this solution oriented approach rather than problem oriented approach.
Fantastic.
So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So I think we have few people who have put down in the chat. So maybe I'll read it out for the benefit of all. So there is Rashmi, who has put down in terms of the strategy which she uses. So it's about letting go of emotions and becoming objective. Be aware of the now, which is what Vatsala also said, being at the moment. And Sujata says it's all about being fearless and having that emotional balance and the desire to do. Great. And Lakshmi Gopal has talked to people who can act as a sounding board. Fantastic. And help you think through options. And then we have Suhana, who says being self-aware and trying to manage my emotions. Fantastic. And we have Lakshmi Gopal, which is all about relax, breathe, spending your energy on your hobbies and upskilling yourself. And then we have Renuka. I have to step away she's saying she's stepping away from her office call. So that's not related to the strategy which she wants to share here. Okay. And then we have Abhija, who says it's all about discipline and self-care. Great. So I think pretty much you guys are already, emotionally resilient. And then we have Lata, having the confidence that this shall pass too. Fantastic, Lata. Yeah. And Divya has two strategy, which is all about networking and be positive in thoughts through finding opportunity in every adversity. Wow, great. And then we have Mishri, who says gratitude practice and yoga has helped me immensely. So I'm with you, Mishri, on this. And then we have, I don't know who it is, it's Galaxy A50, it says. So it is all about staying positive. Fantastic. And Akhil Iyer says, I write to bring out my emotions. Oh, that's all about journaling. Fantastic, Akhil. In fact, I also do that a lot. This makes me feel a lot better. I practice taking one step at a time in life, not think about the outcome, but take actions. I think that's exactly what probably what Neeraj said and what even I shared. And Galaxy A50 is saying one more thing, which is believe in yourself. I would be happy if also Galaxy A50 says who it is. I'm unable to actually put a name behind that Galaxy. Yeah, and then we have Prabha Shashi Kumar, who's saying decide on the goal. Oh, okay. And then we have Preeti, which is affirmations and visualization. Fantastic. It's all about visualizing, something positive is going to happen, visualizing your future. Great. And then we have, Galaxy A50 is nothing but Jagata. Hi, Jagata. Thanks for, putting your name there. Thank you so much. And then we have Vijay Shri. Nothing lasts forever. You're very right, Vijay Shri. All these storms which come and hit us is not going to be there with you forever. Yeah, that's a fantastic thing. So great. So I'm really glad actually in hindsight, this breakout did not work. And the technology gave away, but we're having everyone to hear actually in this discussion. Then we have
that was a small adversity we had and we went ahead.
Pardon?
I said that was a small adversity we had.
Exactly. So it was a setback, but the opportunities opened up for us, right? Then we have Padma, who says self-confidence, persistence, and adaptability. Wow. And we have Minish, who's saying that it's, he handles it with patience and positivity. Fantastic, and is there anyone else who want to go? I think, wow. I mean, I'm really, overwhelmed with all that what you have written down and shared, and pretty much resonates with what probably me and Neerja came about in terms of, the strategy. So maybe, Neerja, it would be a good idea for us to actually go to the next part of the thing and talk more on the strategy part as to, and really discuss that.
Yeah, we can do that. I just want to give an opportunity to anybody else who's not yet put it in the chat but wish to speak it out. Yeah, we have time.
Yeah, please unmute and you're welcome to do that.
Hi, this is Ranjana. Yeah.
Hi, Ranjana.
I just know I joined. I was thinking that it was around 6 o'clock. I mean, then I realized that after joining it had gone. I'm so sorry for that. I mean, I just wanted to say what are the problems I am facing in my organization and also with me. Okay, the thing is that I am...
Ranjana, if you don't mind, just sorry to interrupt, so that you are also in sync with what we are discussing right now. Is it okay?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah. So Ranjana, at this point of time, what we are trying to discuss is more related to of course, we all have setbacks, we all have challenges, we all have problems, what we face. But what's more important is how do we really bounce back with that, what we get hit with. So what we are trying to share now is the strategies, what has helped us, in the past or maybe in the current moment. Maybe, if you can reflect on that, that will be great. And then maybe we will take on this part of your question a little later. Is that okay?
Yeah, fine. Yeah. So basically, patience is something which had helped me a lot in in many of the situations. I mean, few years back, I generally blast out with people because they just don't understand what I am trying to say. Whatever you say, there are certain people, they'll be in their own way of thinking, and then I have basically tried to handle those people. Patience is something which had helped me a lot. Apart from that, I mean, act basically based on the situation. I mean, whatever comes up, I mean, you should keep yourself cool. Be cool, okay. And those are the things which had helped me.
Okay, thank you so much, Ranjana. And is there anyone else who would like to share or was joined a little later? We would love to hear you also.
Hi, I'm Prabha here.
Hi, Prabha.
Yeah, just want to elaborate on what I have pinged earlier on the goals part. So whenever I had a setback, there's 2 or 3 critical setbacks that I have had. So whenever I have had a setback, there used to be 2 or 3 solutions or 2 or 3 things that I could achieve when I come out of the setback. Like, is it peace that I would want, or is it I had to win as an individual, or I had to win the people, or should I show my expertise? So there were 2 or 3 outputs of it. So every time I had to first decide on what is the output that I need. Is it I had to be on the people side, or it's just that I had to show my expertise? So that is one step that I've already used during my setbacks that has helped me a lot. So just wanted to put it here.
Okay, thank you so much. Anybody else would like to share? Okay, so I think pretty much, Neeraja, everyone has shared. Maybe we can deep dive into each of the strategy. That would help.
Yeah.
Right, and probably we can also have some discussion around that.
So great. I think the idea behind getting you all to speak out was the fact that all of us, as I started, have gone through enough and more in all our lives, or you would have seen others who've gone through and dealt with it. So it's not new. And each of us has a different mechanism, maybe to kind of adapt to every situation, or, kind of depending on the situation, the severity, the circumstances, who's impacted, we have strategies. So Veena and I, at the beginning, we put a disclaimer that we are not, academic researchers or psychologists. What we thought we would bring about with this webinar is to talk about experiences. And yes, we have some combined experiences, but I thought the power of the group would be really immense to help all of us. There are certain things that I have learned, certain things that Veena would have learned from these discussions. So I will probably just present a couple of slides on strategies, which I think amongst all of us we've covered all of it, but we'll just go through it, which could be a summary of whatever we've discussed so far. And then we can take on, maybe despite the fact that we were aware that this is something that we should do, we're still struggling to do. If there's a question of that sort, or you tried something and still something is holding you back, we can take those questions and the questions which came before, which were also put out on our event page. So the first and foremost is to nurture optimism. So when I say optimism, it is not fantasy, right? So yesterday I was in a webinar where somebody explained the difference between a dream and a fantasy. So there is pessimism, there is optimism, and there is also something called as being realistic. So optimism is that things are only going to get better, but also be realistic to say, in the current situation, how do I make it better? Okay, so you can't always, so that's the action. You can't always say, yeah, things will get better, and not do anything, to kind of overcome whatever you are going through. So that's one of the strategies, that one can use. The second, many of you spoke about accept the situation. I think acceptance is the biggest to move on. If you are in denial, there is no way you're going to come out of it or, move ahead. So first and foremost, accept the current situation, and then you kind of also have to be a little flexible, because you thought this is how life is going to be. You might have, if I just look at the current corona situation, in the month of March, you possibly have lined up, a few things, which you are going to plan in June and July, personal, professional, whatever. And we've been hit with this lockdown. So accept that this is the reality and be a little flexible. You may have wanted it to happen in a particular format. For example, for Veena, Suman and I from Inroads, we would have loved for us to do workshops in person, go and meet people in person and things of that sort, right? Because at the end of the day, the personal connect, when you are face-to-face, we are face-to-face now, but sitting next to each other is definitely a different experience. But we accepted the fact that this is what it is today. And we said, what can we do? And we decided to launch a series of webinars. We decided to do expert chats, and we decided to do some coaching sessions online and see how it progresses. So that's the second bit. Always draw strength from your past, because this is not the first time, right? We've had many, many such situations in the past. So the story that I narrated about me having, been downgraded one grade below. Maybe that was the first time I went through that situation. But after that, there have been multiple, times. It may not have been a similar thing where the grade is being brought down, but situations where you are in the office setup, in a professional environment, and things are not going the way that you wanted. Always reflect on what happened last time. Reflect on what you did last time to get over it, and reflect on what the outcome was, which is most important. So there was always a positive outcome that came from that situation, and then you automatically get your strength and move on. If your focus, don't keep thinking of the negative, which we already discussed. The learning bit which came out from many of you was awesome. You have to continuously keep learning from every adversity. So I was in another webinar where one of the HR heads of one of the airline companies said the day the lockdown was announced, the airline industry is one of the worst hit industries, right? The HR head, or rather CEO, met all the leaders, and the first statement he made was, never let a good crisis go away. Okay, so shift your focus. So you have an opportunity, look at it as an opportunity, and start learning about how to do things in this changed world, or in the current situation, what else can be done. So you probably have to learn a few new things, you have to adapt, you have to see what somebody else is doing and maybe even copy that, but start doing it in your way and in your style. That will move things ahead.
So just to add to Nisha, what you just said, it's also related to, that accepting change, because and unless and until you accept change is where you realize that your mind starts opening up in terms of the opportunities, and mind starts looking at newer ideas. Because if you don't accept, then you're going to be still in the same space where you are. Say, for example, what Neera just said, like, we are used to the world of where, we love to have this, face-to-face interaction and things like that. But moment you accept that change is where the second, step happens, where you start looking at, shifting your focus in terms of what else can you do, right? And looking at and taking actions to move forward, rather than, being in the current space. Okay, it's all gone, I mean, this COVID is, completely doomed in terms of my situation where I am today. So these two are, all of these are also related. It's not that it's one in isolation, right? So, take it forward.
So, and of course, Veena also spoke about having the internal locus of control, which is you are responsible for your actions. You're not responsible for what possibly happened, but the actions are in your control, right? So take responsibility for those actions, and you can't keep blaming he did, she did, the past and all of that. That happened, but then to move ahead is in your hands. So take that responsibility and take certain decisions, take certain steps, move ahead and make peace. That's the most important. Like, for example, I took the decision, took the role which was at a grade lower. I did a few things, spoke to the MD, which was also spoken by a few of you. Speak to an external person, speak to a different person. You get some perspectives, which kind of helps you think of it, the situation a little differently. And whatever choices you made, whatever decisions you made, make peace with it. Maybe if you want to reflect, or he advised me, have a checklist to say, okay, why did you take the decision? Because it's a big impact that it probably haunt you for a while. You can always go back to that sheet of paper where you wrote down to say, okay, fine, this is the reason, and I'm at peace with it because my priorities have been sorted out with this decision that I am taking.
So just to add to, just because this is also very close to me, I mean, in the sense this strategy is something which I always adopt. It's also about coming out of that victim behavior. A lot of times when I'm coaching people also, in fact, I keep saying that, a lot of us, whenever we face this setback or an adversity, we get into that, that victim mode, saying that, oh my God, why, earth has fallen on me only, why anything has happened, why it's happened on to me only, so the moment you get into that, what's going to happen is it's going to get into a spiral effect of you getting that negative emotions and things like that. Whereas if you bring and completely change and bring that in terms of, whatever good or bad happens, it is your responsibility and you are taking the ownership of it. believe me, the shift automatically happens in your mind where you start taking control of your life and you start looking at, okay, you don't ask the question of why me. You'll ask, what can I do to bring back control, in my life? So that, the internal focus, locus of control is all about, moving away from that victim behavior, which all of, most of the times when we face, especially very big adversity, it could be relationship break, or it could be, someone, loved ones who pass away for us and all of that, or, maybe you've lost your job, whatever, or your promotion. And then you ask it because, it always happens to me, I'm always, so that moving away from that is a very, very important, muscle to actually develop. And that automatically builds your confidence, your self-esteem, and taking that ownership of your life, and not letting that control go away from you, actually.
So, of course, the find purpose strategy has also been, discussed by many people in terms of go and volunteer, do some community service. So there is something, beyond our, day to day, I have a job, I have to earn money, I have to, ensure I have a great bank balance and all of that. But there is something beyond that, right? What's your calling? What's the purpose that you have in your life? So keep at that, keep looking at that and ensure that you move towards that. That is definitely going to enable you to calm down, enable you to look at the positives, enable you to look at opportunities in that space, and then move on from there. Self-care is very, very important. Self-care is always important, but especially in these situations, because you are feeling depressed, you are feeling angry, you probably kind of throw that away, but that should continue. Your routine in terms of taking care of your physical and your mental being is absolutely, absolutely important, because the physical exercise that you do and the stress that it develops, when I say stress in the positive manner, it helps us to adapt with the rest of the stress that we undergo on a daily basis. So keep at it. That should not be, kind of thrown out of the routine, and definitely avoid any negative outlets. For some people, they kind of think that, okay, fine, let me get onto drugs or get onto alcohol to just forget the situation, right? But it's as temporary as we all know. So keep away from that. And building connections is absolutely important. Now, you can't start building connections when you are in that situation. So I always, say this: you cannot dig a well when you're thirsty. So ensure that you are a social being, you have developed connections, and you've nurtured those connections. And at times like this, you can always go back, call on them, ask them for advice. And maybe they don't have anything to give in terms of advice. But even the fact that you can speak to somebody and pour out is also
Neeraja? Neeraja, can you? Hello? I think Neeraja is facing some bad connection.
I understand that.
So Neeraja, we actually lost you in between completely.
Okay, I was talking about practicing spirituality, which is the point which is there. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I said that, there's no one definition of spirituality. It's at the end of the day, whatever works for you. If like somebody gave an example of chanting, somebody gave an example of, thinking of positive thoughts and, kind of speaking about it every day. So whatever that be, and if you don't have anything, you might want to reflect on, do you want, start on something. But ensure that you're part of a group that is also having similar beliefs. Then you kind of get strength from that entire group and you move on. So these are some of the strategies which we have. Some of these are things that Veena and I have practiced. Many of these have been kind of articulated by you in different ways, but there is a way to deal with it. What I would like to,
actually, we have few more people who have written down some more strategies.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing before we kind of get on to that. Q&A is that I don't want anybody to think that, okay, fine, if I start practicing all of this, the next time a setback comes, I automatically am resilient and things will be great. That doesn't happen. you do go through the same curve. You do go through the emotions, but you kind of either reflect on the past, or because of the way you have conditioned yourself from the past setbacks, the next setback kind of becomes easier to deal with. So I also want to kind of leave that message that none of this says that next time things happen you're going to be perfectly fine. That's not going to be. You will go through emotions. We are all human, but it becomes easier for us to kind of cope with it. As Veena said, it's a muscle and it only gets better. Yes, Veena, please go ahead.
Yes. So just to build on to what Neerja said before we move on to what some of the people are sharing, it's all like a muscle, and the pain what you would go through will probably be less, because it's not that just because you go, you are practicing some of the strategies, it doesn't mean that you will not face any adversity, right? We all would face, because sometimes things come which is very uncertain and unpredictable, in terms of the way the life is for all of us, right? And but the pain what you would go through probably would be less, depending on how you have been building that muscle. And I'm sure whatever you have said, it's all these strategies help you to build that muscle, and the cycle time to bounce back also is dependent on how you have built these muscles, right? So it's all about the pain, probably the pain what you would go through, and the cycle time what you would have to bounce back is dependent on how you actually build this muscle of yours. And we have few people who are writing some more strategies which we have they have been using. One is Akhil, as I write and believe. So I think Akhil does a lot of journaling. Failure is the best teacher, and not giving up is the best attitude. I think it's a lot to do with the attitude what you build as well, in terms of facing this failures or the setbacks. And Prabha says, just give it to the universe and tell them what you need, and just I'm missing that message. Just leave it as if it is already done. Great. And we have some more people. Anything I missed? Okay.
And we are also opening it for questions now. So happy to kind of take questions and see if there is something that we have not yet addressed. Rekha, I know that you messaged me with a question. I don't know if Rekha is still there, but if you wish to bring it up for a discussion in this wider forum, you could, ask that question. Anybody else also who wishes to ask any questions on this topic? Otherwise, I'll also go back to the list of questions that we received.
Yeah. So maybe you could start with that, Neerja.
Sure. There was a question which said, for developing emotional resilience, what's the first thing we need to know so that being resilient doesn't become overwhelming? Which is a good question. So I have told you, and Veena has told you 100 things, and you say, okay, fine, from tomorrow I'm going to practice all of that. But it is going to be difficult. It is sometimes going to be overwhelming. So the reality is, it is going to take time. Please know that things are not going to, set right in a day, in a month, in a year, depending on how bad the situation is. So it is going to take time. So accept that. It is going to take a lot of strength, and it is also going to require help from other people. So first, understand, accept this. And as you are moving on, with any of these strategies, you will continue to experience some setbacks. So also be aware of that. It's not that, I did one thing and, life became all right. You will have to continuously keep doing things, and, certain things will work, certain things will not work, and there will be setbacks along the path. So also be aware of that. But eventually, you will reach a position, and when you look back from there, you will realize how far you have come. So that's something that I think you should be aware when you start, practicing some of the strategies that we have discussed. Have any questions come? Otherwise, I'll continue with the questions that we have from our Google Sheet. Another question is there a scale to measure and quantify an individual's emotional intelligence? Not relevant to emotional resilience, but Veena, do you want to kind of take that question?
So there are many tests which are available. So I know there's one called MSCEIT. I don't know if you've heard about that. So that's one which is a very popular test, which actually tells you about how to you can go through, and it also measures emotional intelligence in different dimensions, right? And there are many more actually. So there are instruments which are available to measure your emotional intelligence, in terms of all the dimensions of EI.
Yeah. There's a question for Prabha. When there are one or two people along with you in the setback, so it could be in the family or it could be in the team, it drains more energy to pull all of us together. So how do we keep refueling our energy or positivity? Definitely, I know that if you're together, like there's a personal setback, could be a loss of a dear one or something in the family, and you the rest of the family members are together, trying to cope with it. I think the strategies are the same. I think you have to kind of not be selfish, not just keep thinking about your own pain. Also kind of think about the others and say, okay, fine, how can I make it a little better for the other person? And in giving, you also kind of there is a little bit of healing. That's what I would probably suggest. Anything else, Veena, to this question?
Yeah, so I think in terms of, as a family or, as a collective, when a setback happens, when everybody is facing the similar emotions or the trauma, and I think it's about connection, where you talk. What's worked for me is to really speak about it and letting out, that emotion. So that's the first thing which also helps. And the second is in terms of whatever you adopt in terms of, and also when you start speaking, you also start looking at the brighter side of it. What else can you do to really come out together collectively, in terms of this trauma which we are facing. So you're right. So it's not that, what we individually face is what impacts you. It is also many times, probably if something happens to my child or my son or my family member, it's going to impact you as well. So how do you collectively come out of that trauma is also about, speaking and letting. I think Divya wants to share something. Divya?
Yes, Veena.
Yeah, Divya, tell me.
So for me, it's like this is a time when we can just come out from our comfort level, and we need to explore the new ways where we can get engaged. As Nirja said, networking is the key. And yes, when the well is dry, we cannot dig that. Yes, we have to be very, very socially available always and do that. That is the key. When I would say the networking is the key, when we can explore that. But at even this point, I can see Nirja everywhere. You are everywhere. You are doing so many webinars. Nirja is doing so many webinars in chat. So even this time, she is not sitting, or both of you are not sitting idle, looking at it. Yes, we cannot do virtual meetups or physical meetups. Everyone is using that. This is the time when we can explore ourselves, find ourselves, and build a relationship with ourselves. And then hit the ground when there is open. So this is a time for preparation for us.
Great. Thank you, Divya.
Yeah. So we are at 6:30, but I will just read Akhil's question. People with high EQ would generally be high on their emotional resilience. Is that a fair understanding? So to better our resilience, we need to practice to up our level of EQ. Veena, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So since we're talking about emotional resilience, obviously there is a lot of impact on the emotions. And first thing, whenever we are hit by trauma or a setback, what happens is all these negative thoughts and all of that comes, and that's nothing but how do you really manage your emotions part of it. Sometimes your emotions can be you have that frustration, your anger, whatever it could be. So yes, you're right. So it is also in terms of high on ER, when you say, is also related to how are you able to manage your EQ part of it. So your high on ER also is also how good are you in terms of building your connections. How are you in terms of managing your emotions, all of it together. So you're right. So these are related.